shopping today and I'll go to school tomorrow. First impressions are incredibly important.
Honey, you can make a wonderful first impression.
Brenda, how could you?
He was a jerk, okay?
I've made my choice and I choose me.
North-South Connection Podcast Network listeners, welcome inside the world of currently West Beverly High and maybe beyond. I am JT, and this is 9021 No So, a Beverly Hills 9020 podcast retrospective series. And I'll be honest, this is something I've wanted to do for quite a while. I think way back, I almost started a written project back at PlayStation.com. And then I've come close to pulling the trigger a couple of times on a podcast series. We did kind of a retrospective, like all-in episode of Talk and Pop on the PlayStation Pop feed a couple years ago, and I was close then. And then it's just kind of been top of mind with it on Pluto. It's on Paramount Plus. It's on Hulu. It's kind of back out there, and it's just been something floating in my mind for a while. And if you're new here, if you found us maybe through a different means, because this is a little bit different than the content that we usually offer on the website, I should say on the podcast feed, welcome in. We do mainly focus on wrestling, but we do have some pop culture stuff in here too. And this will be hopefully one that sticks around for a while. So I'm not going to belabor the point, but I do just want to talk about the format of the show. So my plan is to go chronologically through the history of the series, episode by episode. But I'm not going to do recaps. I'm just going to do kind of a quick synopsis of what happened in the episode. We're going to do some takeaways, and then we're going to do categories that we've created. And we'll talk the episode through those categories. We'll do a final ranking. I've done some tracking, different stuff that we'll get to as we move along here. And we'll see how far we go. I'm also going to welcome in rotating co-hosts. So it'll be me as the only primary host, but I'm going to have a pretty regular set cast. My plan is to get diehards. My plan is to get maybe people that got in later, and also maybe some haters or some of those who've never seen it to get their thoughts as well as we move along. I want to really try to mix things up. But my first guest is a diehard. He's one of the original 9021 bros. We've been talking 9020 for a long time. And amazingly enough, we've also done a lot of audio together. We even co-host a show together. But I don't know, Tim Capel, if we've ever done a show just me and you, my friend.
JT Rosero, I'm not sure it has been just the two of us on a show. But I really like this format. I like keeping it tight, keeping it concise, having a rotating guest panel, perhaps, should keep things fresh. I think it's the right way to do it. This is a long fabled, I think long promised podcast project. We all wanted to do it. Every time we do something that's related to 90210, tangentially related, or doing like as you said, that retrospective or like a live watch on Pluto, it gets those creative juices flowing again. So you're like, all right, I'm going to pull the trigger.
And that's what bumped me on this one. Because we, in the pandemic era, right, we've been doing these, a group of us that are close friends. We do a Saturday night Skype call late at night, and usually we'll watch wrestling or we'll talk. It's just a way, right, to keep in touch and bullshit.
Sure.
Yep. It was a way to kill time and stay sane for a while. And now it's just kind of become a tradition. Well, last week, before we were able to switch over to the wrestling, we happened to notice, I think you were watching, right, on Pluto?
Yeah, we were just farting around looking for something to watch. We were on Pluto. Again, we had done the live watch of the infamous flashback, 60s flashback episode of 90210. So look for that podcast if you want for more 90210.
Yeah, I guess we'll pause right there quick at the Jenny Position podcast feed. If you just search the Jenny Position, yes, she does a show called, if you heard about Pluto, where she'll have a different guest every other week and just live watch something random on Pluto TV. And you and I were the guests on that a couple weeks ago back, and we did live watch an episode of 90210, like you said. It's the infamous one with they go back to 1969, the Vietnam War, Brenda finds a diary, et cetera, et cetera. So that initially got the juice flow, and then last week we did as we were waiting to kill some time to switch over to some wrestling, we realized it was the iconic, about to be the iconic. It was actually the episode before it, but then it was set to be the iconic episode in Palm Springs, which I believe was season 5?
Season 5 finale, yeah, back to back. We managed to catch the I Choose Me.
Yeah, that's what it was.
An ultimate episode, which is also Andrea's farewell. And then the great Palm Springs getaway weekend that you and I love so much. Just happened to catch them, like of all episodes for them to be showing. Pluto just kind of rotates through the first 5 seasons, I gather. I think those are, yeah, those are the only ones. But I mean, five seasons worth of episodes is a hell of a lot of content, and for us to just so happen to catch those iconic, we had to do it. We had to watch it. Right. Which we did on the call, and it surprisingly held our interest for, as kind of rambunctious as those calls tend to get. I think it sort of actually kept us focused, which is shocking.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to relive it. Spoiler, it's probably like a top 3 episode all time for me, if not number 1. And yeah, there's so much happens in that one. So we watched it, and then all that week after, it was just like in my head between listening back to the Pluto one and then watching that. It's like, this feels like it's finally the time. And I've just never figured out the format. And then I was cutting the grass the other night, and it just kind of clicked for me for whatever reason that like this is how I wanted to do it. So, real briefly, a minute or less or so, Tim, just tell me your history of like when you started watching the show, and like did you see it through? Like when did you stop?
Yeah, so I guess OG 9021 bro here. I was watching it not from the jump. I would have been way too young when the show actually debuted in 1990, but I started watching it like kind of late into the 4th season as it aired. Mind you, I was still entirely too young to be watching the show. I would have been in 4th grade. And the reason I know that is my birth year and my school years kind of line up with the seasons of the show, so it's easy to figure out. I don't have to put too much thought into that. So I know it was like 4th grade. I'm watching this show, this teen drama that it's not the most appropriate thing, but it's the 90s. Parents didn't really care about stuff like that. You don't stop and think about how much just trash you used to watch as a kid because it existed and there was nothing.
There were only so many options. Yeah.
It's like, there was nothing else to do, nothing else to watch. Most of it was bad. And I mean, children today do not have that experience. They're not watching anything that is not very specifically dialed into their particular interests or niche, Right. But totally different world back then. So I'm watching the show, kind of getting into it. Don't entirely understand it, like everything that happens, right? Because I am so young. But I don't know. There's like older kids that maybe talk about it a little bit. So I felt a little bit cool watching this, hip, very of the moment type of show. And I mean, I got locked in I didn't see like every episode as it aired weekly back then, but I got locked in with season 5. So it would have been going into like 5th grade, and that's where I'm just addicted to it, watching it every week. Of course, that's the introduction of Valerie. So I'm more of a, maybe controversially, more of a Valerie fan than a Brenda fan, which I understand that, not everyone is going to be cool with that, but just to let folks know where my loyalties lie. Kept watching it through, I would say, most of season 8, like when Dylan left and then Noah came in, and that's where I started to like really drift off. Just lost interest in the shows. Too many original characters gone. I did sort of start watching it again when Dylan came back. So like season 9, 10. I know I didn't watch those in their entirety at the time, but I would pop in here and there and sort of kept up with it. So there was a gap there, like from end of season 8 into early 9, but for the most part, I saw it through. And as I was watching, again, like from season 5, season 6, they started airing in syndication reruns. I think at the time would have been on the WB. Yeah, that sounds right. They aired it weekdays. It was like weekday afternoons. So I was like in fucking 90210 heaven, watching the show, new episodes as they came out and getting caught up from the beginning. I'd never seen those earlier episodes. And I was like, oh my God, I can watch this show literally every single day. So, and eventually they, I think at first they were just doing the first 3 seasons in syndication. and then they threw 4 on there, so I got caught up with what I didn't see from season 4. So very quickly I was able to see
everything,
pretty much all of the show, as it existed at that time. About 4.5 seasons worth.
Yeah, I want to say I got into it like season 3 because I remember the Paris stuff, and I vividly remember like Dylan and Kelly getting together, like in the pool, and then Dylan's dad getting blown up. I remember all that stuff.
Right.
So I would have been 11 or so when that hit. And I watched with my mom, which like seems crazy now. And then I think there was a time, I want to say, so I would have been 11 when it started. Probably within a couple of years, we'd both watch, but separately. Like it started to get like a little weird, that I'd be watching this it was like 14, 15, it gets a little odd. So I think I'd go to my room and she would watch it in the living room. But my cousin Melissa was a diehard fan. So I had her, and her and I would always talk about it. She was a couple years younger than me, but we were the two in the family that were really like the diehard 90210 fans. And I stuck with it. I definitely remember Dylan leaving. I think I did the whole season after that with Susan, and then I want to say it was like close to when Brandon left. I think I kind of dipped out, but I definitely I remember watching the finale, so I think that was like appointment TV for me. Like I came back to watch that to see what happened and how it wrapped up. But I don't really think I paid much attention, which would have made sense because those last 2 seasons were what? 99, 2000. I went to college in September 98, so that's probably around when I stopped watching it when I went to college, I'm guessing. And then I must have been home probably because the finale was May 17th. I probably had just gotten home freshman year or something. I remember watching that episode at my house. So, all right. So that's our history there. So let's move along. Let's talk Beverly Hills 90210, Season 1, Episode 1, Class of Beverly Hills. So Minnesota, and look, this is what we're going to do. I'm literally going to read the 4 sentences from Wikipedia, and then we're going to move on, right? That's all.
Yes. If you want to know details of what happens in this episode, watch the episode. It's streaming on Hulu. It's on CBS All Access, Paramount, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not hard to find. So anyway.
Oh, and we should shout out too. You found an Instagram account that's awesome, right? Because as you know, as most people know, all these streaming services, one of the big issues in 90210 was all the music. There's so much like current music they would use, and most of it's dubbed out. But Tim found an awesome Instagram account that is remastering scenes with the actual songs, which is really cool. So it's not whole episodes; it's just like the scenes themselves with the songs on it. Do you have the title in front of you?
It's the Instagram account is BH90210 restored. All just one word. So BH90210 restored. I think that the person curating that is through like about this 5th season, like about halfway done, but committed to seeing it through to the end. I mean, it's kind of a pain in the ass because you got to scroll all the way down to the end / beginning of this Instagram page to see the season.
My problem is I kept getting derailed.
It's really easy to do. So, I mean, just like all these old shows, they had no idea that streaming or home media would ever be a realistic concept, back in 1990 when it was produced. And the thing is that 90210, more than most shows, had a lot of contemporary music used in its episode. I mean, exponentially more. So it really sucks that you don't get to hear. With other stuff, you're kind of like, it wasn't a big part of the show anyway. Who cares that much? But I really do think that the music was a big part of what made the show the show.
Agreed.
At the time. So it definitely adds to the experiences. Just see these scenes as they were originally presented. So you watch the stuff on Hulu and streaming, whatever, even on DVD, you're going to have these horrible dubs, which, if you never saw the show in the first place, maybe you don't notice. But it is important to know that those were not the real songs.
And for this show, we're trying to hunt. Like, we have some from other means that have the music. So we're going to try to do our best. But at the very least, we'll list the songs at the end that were in the episode.
You want to know something crazy that I just found out today, though, Justin?
What's that?
Pull the curtain back a little bit. After all the sort of hemming and hawing that I was doing, trying to find like a source that had the original, like all the original songs intact in the pilot, I went on Hulu, of all things, played it. I swear to God, they're all the original songs in the pilot.
Wow, that's crazy.
It is. It is. So for the pilot, at least, if you watch that on Hulu, I can't speak to other streaming services. I don't know how it's sourced, but watch that pilot on Hulu. You will get the original. I don't know why. I don't know if they fucked up. I don't know if it's a different rights issue because it's a pilot, so maybe it's more like a movie than a show. I don't know.
So they don't have the French hot in here?
Yeah.
We have that on ours.
So the music that we talk about in this episode, you can actually hear it on Hulu. If you don't have Hulu, just go to this Instagram and, you'll at least see the clips of the various scenes. But it's crazy. After all that, I'm like, shit, it's on Hulu. But I checked other episodes and it's like, nah, these are all dubs.
Yeah, that's weird.
I have no idea why they made that exception just for the pilot.
All right, so Minnesota natives Brandon and Brenda Walsh begin attending West Beverly Hills High and experience culture shock as they become exposed to glamour, wealth, and privilege that the new classmates possess. Following a romantic date, Brandon accidentally spreads a rumor about him sleeping with a notorious party girl. Brenda uses a fake ID to get into a nightclub and passes herself off as a college student and begins to date a young lawyer. Two freshman students, named David and Scott, attempt to navigate their way through the social scene at school. So this aired on October 4th, 1990. So it is a very 90s show, not 1989, which I always get mixed up. I always, for some reason, think it was 89, but yes, it does start.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you might think it the 89-90 television season, but no, it's the 90-91 television season. So this tells me I would have been in first grade when this aired.
Yeah, so I would have been 9. So
wow,
that is third grade, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, so we have 9 categories we're going to get to, and then I've tracked every character. I'm going to keep track of as they debut, every relationship that appears, and then like key places and things. And then at the end of the show, Tim, we're going to rank all the main characters, which I have noted that there are 10 of them.
Yes.
And they'll get reverse points. We'll track that going forward. All right, so I wanted to just hit some kind of things that I picked up watching the episode, and then we'll get into the categories. So out of the gate, Brenda is like flipping out in the morning, the first day of school, because she doesn't have anything to wear. And I feel like if the outfit is so important to her, and I know they had just moved because there's boxes everywhere, I feel like she would have put some time into thinking about what to wear at this outfit.
She would have figured it out, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like she had seen other people already, right? Because she doesn't really let on yet that she's seen. She just kind of knows she's going to look good in Beverly Hills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's sort of nebulous, the timing here, as far as when exactly did they move in. It's obviously not their first night, but as you said, they're still unpacking boxes. It is the first day of school, so they've made it in time to start the school year on the actual first day. It's not like they're coming in the middle of the academic year or something. But yeah, well, at the same time, though, this is Brenda acting very Brenda, right? Where just everything is the biggest deal in the world, which I kind of appreciate that because it feels that's what being a teenager is, right? It just everything's
do or die.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Well, and I think it did a good job too of showcasing her. What become a pretty big character trait for her for a while is her thirst to be accepted and fit in, where she always kind of feels like the odd duck throughout the series, where she rarely at times she'll find it, but rarely ever feels like she really fits in, and that kind of is already on display here.
Mm-hmm. Which is very sort of ironically contrasted among her peer group. Like all of her friends really do accept her from the jump, as we'll see, and she sort of like wants the things that they have, and they are more coveting her lifestyle with the stable family life, the loving home, like just the sense of normalcy that the Walshes represent in this show and in this universe that really none of the other characters have or have to some degree, but it's in a very like kind of heightened reality. Like Donna may come from a loving family, but they certainly don't travel in the same circles as the Walshes.
Right. And speaking of the Walshes, so we see the first glimpse of the Walsh home, and it's kind of
wrong.
Yeah, it's not that Walsh house.
No.
So I guess we'll see how quick the real one, shows up. I'm guessing by the next episode that they're in the house we would know and love. But this was like, it took me, I was all discombobulated.
Yeah. Mm. The kitchen is all wrong. The exterior is totally out of place. This is one of those things I put down as not so much this may be a category just for this episode, pilotitis, where it's just the things that will change very quickly and that you see with pilots of these long running shows, just totally off. Like the house, you don't have all the characters there. I want to say some of the parents, particularly one in this episode, is played by somebody else entirely. Yep. I think even some of the parents' names are different, which is going to come up later in this first season. So they're working through some things. Brandon's car, it's not Mondale, is it?
Right. No, it is not. It's like a Chevy shipbox basically.
Mm-hmm.
This brown car, and it's cool the juxtaposition they do out of the gate. So I liked how they kind of wrapped the open. It was an extended open for this episode into like a montage of them coming to school and kind of showing off like what Beverly Hills is going to look like for them.
Oh my God, that montage. Yeah.
I thought it was really well done. Plus you get the extended version of the song, which was cool.
Which is not the song either yet. It's that's going to go through a few permutations before they figure it out.
Right. But it's kind of there, right? I mean, it's
yeah, it's recognizable. It's just a little bit more, feels a little more 80s than it does 90s.
Right. So we get that, and we see Steve's Corvette. Steve Sanders makes his appearance in the montage with the iconic license plate already. That is one thing that's not piloted. That is already established.
Mm-hmm.
IA4RE as his license plate, of course, which was that stays with us, I think, through the entirety of the show. So
yep, and his vet.
And Steve, I mean, he's horny for Kelly Taylor right away. You could tell he's like pissed that they broke up. He's obviously bugs him throughout the episode quite a bit. So this is like establishing their backstory a little bit. And I actually thought they did it pretty well. Like we know by the end of this that they were together. Steve claims he broke up with her, but it's clearly he's like, completely still in love with her and wants to get back with her. And that's, it seeps through everything he says. And right down to him trolling her when she says she got a no job. He says it looks like it took about a foot off of it.
Right.
Like, he's already like, you could tell he's just like ornery about the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. He's kind of negging her, but at the same time, it's Steve, and he sort of makes a good first impression, honestly, for this show.
I loved him in this episode.
Yeah, the way he pulls in the Corvette and gets out, and like this guy's all business right away. And we were kind of comparing notes back and forth before this, and both of us made the observation this isn't quite as Walsh centric as we sort of remembered it being. Because you get this exchange between Steve and Kelly, and as you said, just sets up a lot of history there with, not a Walsh in sight. Like, I remember going into this pilot, I was thinking, okay, it's basically the Walsh's show. We're not going to see a scene. We're not going to see an interaction between characters that does not include a Walsh kind of thing. Whether it's one of the kids, the parents. But no, really, we're seeing like actual characters outside of this family having sort of fully formed lives. Steve.
That's what I love about it too. Like they're not establishing these other people. Like it really feels like us and the Walshes have been dropped into this world that has been circulating all this time. So we're not resetting everybody. Like I thought they did a nice job with that writing on that. Like just
I did too.
Everything felt, and where it wasn't, it was clear why. Like David Silver and Scott Scanlon are freshmen. So like that's why they're not on the radar of these other people. But like, Donna, Kelly, Steve, like they all know each other and have a world that's already been built that now we're coming into. And we also established the Walsh as kind of as studs out of the gate. Like Brandon, clearly is got the looks down already, and like he's kind of desirable. Brenda, they're both positioned. Was it like right at the principal like out of the gate? Like the grades are good, they're great students, so, like, they're good looking. Like they're gonna fit in. It's just how easily will they fit in. But
they're not going to have a hard time making friends, and I'm glad the show didn't like try to make that a plot point or some kind of conflict of we can't make friends, we're the new kids. Like clearly they're not going to have any struggles socially or probably academically, as you said, with the scene with the principal, who the principal is also different, not Mrs. Teasley. So I don't know.
He's a little creepy, honestly. We'll talk about that in a minute. But
that's another whole like. What were
Well,
they
so
doing?
yeah, so the interesting thing to me, that was one thing that really stood out. That in some ways it felt very Saved by the Bell to me, where they really focused a lot on the teachers, which isn't a thing later, unless they're begging the students. It's not a thing later really, like to have focus on the class. And this episode had a lot of focus on like the classroom, what's
Yep.
going on in the classroom. The teachers like kind of had personalities. Was the was the weird chemistry guy? Was that the principal from Billy Madison? I meant to look it up because it looks
Oh
just like him.
God. Yeah, you might be right. I didn't think to look, but you're right. Yeah, we see this named chemistry teacher. We have a Spanish teacher, again, the principal, and I mean there's even a scene between the principal is hitting on the Spanish teacher and asked her out on a date, and I'm like, was was there some kind of intention to give the teachers subplots of their own in the show? Because that is something that never happens at any point in this series, and it's just one of those insane things that you can tell that they were throwing out there to just see if they wanted to develop it or if it caught on, and obviously they abandoned it very quickly.
Yeah, so I don't think he was the same guy. It looks just like him though. Josh Mostel plays Principal Max Anderson. I don't see 90210 in his filmography, so I guess not. But it looked just like him, did it? I mean, I thought it was him for sure when he got out of that car. And then the way he acts later,
Yeah,
definitely
he
felt
looks
like it.
very like pressed. All the adults, all the teachers, when they pull up in the scene with
Oh, he looked
the
miserable when he gets out of the car. He's like, "Fuck,
like
back to school."
you could just see the whites in their eyes.
David and Scott seem so tiny.
Oh my God.
Like
Yeah.
just miniature men in this big giant fucking world. They did a good job casting them, given their size differential.
I mean, they're like adolescents, basically. I mean, people joke about how all the actors are like too old to be
Mhm.
playing high school students, and it's like not in their case. Like,
Not them, no. They look too young.
yeah,
Like if they were
really
like, they look like they were like in seventh grade maybe in this thing.
do. Hmm.
But they do establish some stuff. So right away, Brenda and Kelly get brought together by fate when there's a brute that wants to sit down at the at Kelly's science lab.
Yeah,
And she's
Martha
like,
dump truck here imported from Heather's.
she's
Trying
like,
to be
seats
left.
taken, seats taken.
Yeah.
And then and Brenda just happens to be standing there, and Kelly says, "Oh yeah, she's sitting here." So they meet that way, and then same thing happens with Brandon and Steve, where they kind of meet by fate in Spanish class, where they happen to be sitting next to each other. So both of them kind of stumble into each other. But we also establish right away that Brandon's going to go write for the Beverly Blaze, which is the newspaper, and he
Yep.
meets Andrea there, who's immediately a know-it-all and annoying, but also a little smitten by Brandon. You can tell, again, those looks on display. And then one last thing I noted too that they kind of already set the stage for is Brandon and Kelly kind of feeling vibes on each other. They both comment that the other one's cute from afar.
Mhm.
So, like, were you surprised some of the stuff that was already established like this early? Like, I didn't expect Brandon, like, him going to the newspaper was like within like 20 minutes of the first episode, he's like signing up, and this is like a
Yeah,
huge
yeah.
part of his identity.
Yeah, well, that part I was sort of I knew he got involved, in journalism in high school pretty early on, so that part didn't. And they had to somehow establish his relationship with Andrea, so I was like, yeah, that more or less tracks with my memories, but kind of the foreshadowing. It's not even really foreshadowing with him and Kelly. Totally caught me off guard. I was like, I don't remember them even having any sort of opinion one way or another towards each other, like for several seasons. But
Yeah, no, it's
I mean, it seems
they're even if it's
really
just seeds for way down the line, like they've established that on some level there's some feeling of attraction there.
admiring each other from afar here from this pilot. Yeah.
All right, so they focus a lot on them adjusting to the big time. We get and then we get the big party at Marianne's house. Scanlon gets
Marianne
shoved.
Moore. Yes.
Yes, Marianne Moore. We'll talk a lot about her, I think. Scott Scanlon gets shoved in the pool, looking like a clown. That was funny.
Mhm.
But then, I guess we can start here because this, I don't know, we're all over the place a little bit. But let's talk about the best scene because it's here for me, and that is
Okay.
David and Steve driving through the night. So Steve gets loaded at the party because he gets pissed at Kelly, and he just had kind of ran into David Silver earlier in the night. And that's where David started fanboying over Samantha Sanders, his mom, who's a soap opera star. And afterward, David's outside because Scott kind of took off on him because they lost track of
Yes.
each other. And David ends up, even though he has no license, has never driven stick shift, he's going to drive Steve's Corvette as Steve's Hammered. And I love this whole scene with, it actually might have some 40-year-old virgin vibes with the drunk Steve in the car, and David's trying to just fucking survive the ride. You get the Kelly and the girls come by and he's trying to impress them, and then the cop pulls up next to him and he's wearing the football helmet just to try so he doesn't obviously look as young as he is. And then you get to the end of the scene where he drops him off, and David forgets to put the parking brake on, and the car, the vet slides down the hill and smashes into another car, and David takes off. But I thought this was my favorite scene, which is our first category to talk about. My favorite scene of the whole episode was this night riding stuff. What did you think?
I'm going to back you up. That struck me right away too as my favorite scene. I knew they were going to have a hard time topping that, and I didn't think they did. I love the party setting itself, but then just seeing Steve from the moment he gets loaded and just thrown out of the party, and has this little meet cute with David, which they have really great chemistry.
Oh, they're so good all throughout this.
Right away. Which again, I don't remember them just being that good and playing off of each other so well, especially just immediately like that. And I mean, Steve gets some very good drunk dialogue as well. Telling David, "Oh, you can do it." Like he's just taking this all in stride. It's not like he's being he is very obnoxious, but it's not like he's being a belligerent drunk. He's not being an asshole to David. He's like, "Hey, drive me home. It's fine. It's no big deal. Drive my Corvette." And David doesn't even have a license. Manages to do it, but then wrecks the car once it's actually in park, which is a great little comedic.
It is funny that he makes it that far before all hell breaks loose. And Steve's friends, he had a bunch of friends with him. They just kind of left it with him and took off. Yeah,
well, kind of telling. Maybe Steve doesn't have as many friends as he thinks he does, or he doesn't have very good friends, clearly. That he's reliant on this freshman to take him home, but he's saying things like, just put the gas in the ignition and step on the key.
He's gone.
It's kind of cheesy, kind of goofy, but it reminded me of, I don't know, like an 80s teen movie in some ways. Especially with David getting pulled over, and then you see him in the visual gag where he's in the football uniform. Just really, really great stuff there. It's not necessarily what you think of when you just think of good scenes from this show, but from this pilot, I really enjoyed all that.
Yeah, it was fun. And to me, it wasn't just like the best of like a shaky pilot. Like it was actually, it was like a legitimately good scene. For sure, all of it. And it establishes their chemistry. And we also learned a little about David because he says at some point in here, like, he was able to drive the car because when your parents are divorced, your dad will basically do anything to keep you happy on the weekends.
Yeah, he's talking about the divorced parental guilt card that he's been playing, basically. So we learned that he comes from a broken home.
Yep, that's established. All right, so now we go back to the school, and Kelly's creating a fake ID for Brenda, but I couldn't tell, like, was she using a pencil to alter her actual ID? Or was it a full fake ID? Like, I'm like, were IDs that flimsy in the late 80s and early 90s that you could, like, just mark it with a pencil and you were good to go? It was like a little piece of paper.
Yeah, it was, and it's just a paper ID. We see it get torn up by the bouncer, who, by the way, did you recognize this bouncer? It wasn't until later today that I realized that guy is actually like a name actor.
He looked really familiar to me. Who was it?
It's Jaimon Hansu. I don't know if I might be butchering that name, but he was a pretty notable character actor. He's kind of like been in everything.
He's not the guy in Dodgeball, is he? Because he looked like him. I don't think it's him.
Is he in Dodgeball? He's in. You would know him from Guardians of the Galaxy. He's the guy who basically arrests Peter Quill, and Quill is giving him the third degree, like, don't you know who I am? And he's like, I'm Star-Lord. And the guy, he goes, who? Yeah. He's that guy.
Okay. So. And the Dodgeball guy I'm thinking of is not, obviously I know, crazy ass killer, not him. But the guy who drives the motorcycle for Ben Stiller, that guy is like bodyguard.
Gladiator. He was in Gladiator also, which was a pretty big role in that.
Well, it's a big role here because he does allow Brenda in, but he kicks the rest of them out. And I thought it was a little shitty on multiple ends. I mean, like, I get he doesn't want to let them in, but he just let their friend in. Like,
I know.
I mean, it was like a real douchebag move. Like, just, I know he's pissed that they tried to fake their way in, but at least, like, go grab the girl so they don't leave her there. I mean, that was, like, that to me was a little unrealistic. And
yeah, because
that aggravated me a little bit.
There's no way Brenda is more convincing than her friends that she's there with, you know. Like,
but even beyond that, like, once he let her in and he said no to them, like, and they're like, that's our friend. Like, a little compassion. Let him go get her friend so they know. Like, she just lets him. He just lets her go in on her own.
Yeah, okay. Let this not only underage girl run around this club, but now completely unaccompanied by.
Yeah,
anyone.
It seemed like real reckless of a bouncer. Then this is where on the version we watched, we had the fake knockoff of Hot in Here playing in the club, which was funny.
Oh my God, yeah, the dueling people shaking their asses to different songs. One a bad dub, one the actual whatever it was, which I didn't really recognize either song, to be honest with you, but that's 1990.
All right, so then we get Creeper Jason comes in at the bar, and actually ends up being a little less creepy than I thought. He, like, at first he comes off pretty creepy, but by the end he's actually not too bad. Well, at the end he is, but in the middle
it gets worse.
So he's a lawyer. He kind of entraps Brenda to stick around and have a drink, and she eventually caves. And we go from there. So again, I told you I wasn't going to recap. These are just things I've noted. I thought Brandon. So Brandon ends up, he chats up. We haven't talked about Marianne yet. Marianne Moore, who is the party host, and it's almost like this mythical character in the school. It feels like everyone thinks she's this party girl, but she's actually kind of reserved. So she's got this like mysterious vibe about her. And her and Brandon met at the party, and then they go for a date. They ride on the bike. And then in the hot tub, I thought this was all pretty hot and well done. I believe.
Yeah. Those lips, man, she had some real 1990 duck lips action going on.
And I do want to talk
that makeout scene,
but we'll get there. I don't understand why Brenda went back to the apartment with the guy. Like she's going to this guy's apartment. And then she's surprised he wants a bang. Like, what did you think was going to happen? Like, she's all surprised. Like, I don't get the thought process from her, from going to be like scared to not wanting the drink, and then, okay, we'll go back to your apartment. Like, it seemed like a real big escalation by her.
I think it's just kind of that 16-year-old brain logic, where, and especially filtered through Brenda's sensibilities, which we've talked about how she's sort of desperate for acceptance and wants to fit in, wants to be perceived as mature and together and, so much older than she is. And, she clearly hasn't put a lot of thought behind this. It's not like she went in there planning to be picked up by some guy alone, which, by the way, this guy, Jason, he's dressed like a henchman from a James Bond villain.
It's the casual male.
Yeah, it's kind of this black and white ensemble going on. And he's, very generically 90s handsome. I think they established he's 25. So I don't know. Some of the interactions between them, I got the sense that there was no way he didn't know already that she was underage, and he was just kind of stringing her along. I don't know. I sort of felt like he was later.
I think he thought she was at least probably like.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think that's kind of their intention. I'm just sort of the way it reads today. I'm almost like I feel like he knew what he was doing and was sort of getting off on treating her like shit almost, and making her feel less than.
I was surprised that he drove her home and didn't force. Like, I was waiting for it to be like a force thing and she escapes or something, and he's like, I'm home. So he ends up being okay in that scene. Now, you mentioned the pilotitis. We do see the fake Jackie Taylor here, which was annoying. And she also pronounces mature, which mature. Oh God, I want to.
But that is something I feel like Jackie Taylor would do.
Probably, but this Jackie Taylor sucked. I'm ready for real Jackie Taylor. Also, so we mentioned the lab teacher earlier. This felt the most out of place to me. This guy, like, he felt like a real Saved by the Bell character. Like that's what he jumped out to me as. He's got the classical music playing, he's making fire with the Bunsen burners, and then he's like creepily moving as they're taking the test. He's fondling the bust. I don't know who the fuck that statue was he had, but he's like fondling it on his desk. Like it was just very odd, this guy.
And we kind of see that same scene twice. Like they do it again later in the episode, at least with the classical music he's playing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like to your point, once was probably enough. Why
none would have been like
none would have been.
We're very focused on these teachers. Him, the Spanish teacher, the principal. Like we just didn't need. It was. I mean, I don't know. I guess they're trying to make it more a high school job. I'm curious when they decided to move away from this, because I really feel like going forward, we barely see class unless the teacher is a big focal point later, like like Gil Myers and stuff. But like we do see some. But at this point, like it just seems like they were really focusing on making it about high school. We were going to see classroom stuff, because there's at least like 8 or 9 classroom scenes in this episode.
And you know what I think that is? I have heard, now I don't know, this may be totally bogus, but I have heard that Aaron Spelling originally was trying to purchase the rights to the Degrassi franchise, Degrassi Junior High, Degrassi High, which were then contemporary Canadian shows, a teen drama, kind of Saved by the Bell, but more serious, and more kind of serialized. But they wouldn't sell. So he was kind of pissed and said, well, I'll just make my own version of that for an American market, essentially. Right. So a lot of these types of tropes, a lot of the things we're sort of singling out as pilotitis are kind of hallmarks of Degrassi, as I understand it. Like it's very issue of the week. They're all like every episode feels like a very special episode. They're all morality plays. It's an extremely large, sprawling cast, people from different social circles that they're not all friends, and they don't even necessarily know each other all in this, this Degrassi universe. And I think that this is, in 90210, we sort of see those influences where I don't think it was originally set up to be the whole gang and they're all friends. Like it's probably Brandon and Brenda as kind of our point of view characters, and then you've got they're doing the everyman gimmick for our benefit, but you've got Steve who represents the popular crowd with Kelly. You've got Andrea, who is very academic, achievement oriented. Scott, who's a total dork. David, who's like the aspiring nerd, but they aren't necessarily all going to get along, and the Walshes are maybe just our links to these different worlds. And Donna's barely a character, right? Like it's just she's
the one thing the
like
pilot got right, yeah. Just
a glorified extra in this pilot. But I think that's how it was set up originally, is just to sort of resemble that model, that template. And they just move away from it.
Yeah, it changes quick. Yeah.
When the show just develops its own identity.
We'll see how quick it does change.
We will.
All right, I wanted to hit our second category because it's right around here that we can really step up our conversation. And one of our categories we're going to talk about is best hookup. And I think, and again, the reason I'm doing this one now is I feel that very confidently that we're going to be on the same page with Brandon and Marianne.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have a ton of competition and a ton of options for this category, but yeah, I mean that's a pretty hot one.
She's great. I mean, she's a queen. Like I mean, she really should have stayed around. I thought she was perfectly casted. And from the meeting at the party to the first date to the him talking to her at lunch where he's kind of flirting over the peanut butter and jelly and the salmon. And she's got the Walkman on. Like I thought that was really well done. And then of course things get a little crazy where Brandon's he's the one that wants to slow down in the hot tub. And basically like, hey, let's get to know each other. And she's like,
his rationale for that was so 1990 also. Right. I felt like it's not, he doesn't tell her like, hey, let's pump the brakes because I'm not ready for this. He frames it more as, you're the girl. Why are you making advances on me? Why are you making the first move kind of thing? Like it's
like,
really
you should want to take it slow.
And it's kind of, I mean, it could be read in a way that's sort of gross, but I just took it as that is so of its time. And and it's not meant to come across as, offensive or sexist or whatever. It's just, I think someone watching that for the first time today, who is maybe unaccustomed to, this type of media, would be like, what? So that was one of those, oh, okay. More things change, huh?
And then beyond that too, we kind of get the America Pie moment with him at the track, with the telling Stifler he's gonna bang what's her name? Like it's kind of similar to that, right? So they're like, what happened? He's like, oh, I did something you could never do, and really Brandon didn't lie, right? None of them probably could have sat in that hot tub and turned her down, right? So he kind of says, I did something no none of you would have ever had the ability to do, and they take that as that means he hooked up with Marianne. So they immediately start spreading the rumor. Now the rumor's all around that Brandon banged her. And this leads to my next point. What's up with this school DJ?
Look,
out of his
made
mind.
The wild thing spotlight.
Out of his mind. He's talking about relationships. Like, what are we doing? He's like, oh, the newest hot relationship.
Putting Steve on blast for getting drunk at the party and just
so what the hell's going on?
What are we doing?
Weird. Principal Jack, we mentioned him earlier. What a player. He's like making moves on the Spanish teacher. First, he's like, you're too Spanish, basically. You need to be less Spanish in your Spanish class. Yeah. And he's like, how about dinner Friday night? It's like, fucking guy.
I love that scene because so at first he's being kind of the academic hard ass, telling Brenda, it's going to be tough. You're going to have to really crack the books here at this. It's going to be so much different from Minnesota. We do things differently. We pride ourselves on academic excellence here at West Beverly. And then he drags the Spanish teacher into his office like, look, your class is too hard. So you got to go. You got to get those grades up or you're out of here.
And then you're going to go to dinner with me. And
yeah, no, let's talk about it more over dinner.
All right. So my second favorite scene, and really in a way, it's a cousin of my favorite scene. So Steve's in class and he's got this alarm with him. And what happened along the line is basically David had Scott's prize Lakers hat that had Scott's name in it. And he leaves it. He had left it in Steve's car the night of the accident. So now they're panicking because this whole time Steve has been trying to track down who the nerd was that wrecked his car. He doesn't remember. He was so drunk.
Blackout drunk, yeah.
And no one knows who the fuck David was. So like no one can pinpoint him. But they're living on the edge because in this car is a hat with Scott Scanlon's name on it. So they decide they have to go break in the car and get the hat. So they go to do that while Steve's in class, and Steve like has a tracker sitting on his desk that goes off, and he just fucking takes off. And I thought this was
in the middle of class. Yeah,
he just leaves, and he's carrying the alarm. He's running out, and David and Scott are like trying to get the hat out of the car, and they don't make it out in time. And like Steve's about to murder Scott, and David admits it was him. And I mean, I thought David was amazing here, talking his way out of it.
Yeah,
he's like basically like, look, I saved your fucking ass, man. Like. And by the way, if you have insurance, you can lie and just say like it costs more and you'll make some money on the whole thing. And that immediately is onto this. Steve's like a scam artist, or like not maybe a scam artist, but like a Ponzi scheme type of guy.
He admires a good grift. Yeah.
Yeah, he's always looking for the next buck he can make. So David picks up on that. I thought those two really stole this episode as a combo. I thought they were tremendous. This whole episode and this scene and the driving scene were great.
Yeah, they did. I would That is really neck and neck for me too. Just Steve bolting in the middle of class is hysterical. Oh, and then it's just like there's no consequences, of course, because it's Beverly Hills and it's Steve.
Well, and he had that alarm with him, like he knew, like he was just waiting. He's like, gotcha, like he's been sitting there waiting for the perp to come back to the car. So
yeah, sitting there with this elaborate setup on his desk in school.
It's really good. And then so Brenda obviously was moving way too fast with Jason the lawyer. I guess it fits her age. She's kind of now gotten a little smitten with him and is kind of naive to the whole thing. But I love the scene at dinner with Jason's friends. I thought they were hilarious.
Oh my God! Yeah.
This guy Ron, of course. So Brenda says she's majoring in astronomy, and Ron's all into astronomy. And he asks like, "What's a black hole or whatever?" And his wife, I don't know if it's his wife or his girlfriend, or goes, "Who cares, Ron?"
Who cares, Ron?
She would have bitch. But that was really funny. So like he's asking these questions, and she's just like shitting all over Ron as he's trying to ask. And in a way, she's inadvertently bailing Brenda out because he's asking shit she clearly doesn't know. She's trying to explain what a black hole is, and I don't know. I thought that was really funny. I thought they were good.
God, yeah. The dinner scene was, I mean, Brenda looks ridiculous, of course. She can't really pull this off, but she's inadvertently getting some help, as he said, from this friend group. Yeah, I want to see a dedicated spinoff for Jason's friends, and that could be the title of the show, Jason's friends.
Jason's friends.
Yeah, and that's all they do is just they have these dinners that makes clear that everyone hates each other and
who cares, Ron?
Who cares, Ron?
So then Brenda finally comes clean to
hole.
Jason, and she thinks like that he's like gonna be cool with it. She's like, you said I could tell you anything. She's willing to put out for him. And it's funny but it doesn't cross her mind. Like she's willing to sleep with him, but like it's statutory rape. Like I don't think 16
right.
age of consent. I don't
that
think
never comes up.
Right. It's like she just thought it'd be cool and he'd be fine with it. Like so, in Jason's defense, I get why he's pissed. He's like, what the fuck? Like I wanted to have sex and you could have got me in, put me in jail, right? And he threatens to sue her parents, which
that's not how that would work.
I think that's a step too far. It's on him to not maybe completely vet her age.
Good luck,
Yeah. So he's kind of an oddball. But I do think, I can see why he was so mad, right? Because she put him in a very precarious position where if they would have went through it that first night and, all of a sudden now here he is having sex with a 16-year-old. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's where my headcanon comes in where I'm like, he knew already, and this is how he's...
It's okay with it?
How he's dumping her. Like, he's kind of getting off on the power flex here.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think a lot of that might just be informed by, recent years.
Yeah, I didn't pick up that at all. I really...
that kind of thing does happen and did happen. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe he was one of those type guys.
I thought he was just more aloof to it and thought she was 18 at least. Because I mean, she does look older than 16. So
yeah, and I think, I know he's supposed to be 25, but he reads as, like a lot of cast members on this show, he looks a lot older than 25. Right.
I can see why a 25-year-old would think she's maybe 18. I guess.
Yes, if he looked like an actual 25-year-old, right. This would be a little less. And if he truly seemed convinced that she was, at least 18, or I don't know, maybe you had to be 21 to get in that club for all I know. I have no idea. I might be more swayed, but yeah, I just thought, this guy's a scumbag kind of thing after that blow up. But especially I could sue your parents. Like,
well, that was stupid. Yeah,
no, you could. You're just a
lawyer trying to lawyer his way out of this. So he drops her off and they're done. Brenda hugs Cindy. But the other thing I just want to point out before we do our next category, another big thing here already is that Brandon already finds out about Andrea living on the other side of the tracks. Like, I didn't realize how quick that came in too. She runs away from him basically after school and he follows her bus.
That's right. We get a suspenseful chase sequence, with dramatic music and everything.
And he's pretty aggressive. He's like, "Why are you here? Why do you live here? Why do you go to West Beverly?" So, and then she admits to him that basically, why is it fair? Just because I live here, I can't go to the best school. It's bullshit. And she uses her grandmother's address to go to West Beverly, and she trusts him now. So they kind of have this bond already where Andrea has trusted him with this big information about her that could really screw up her future. So.
Yeah, well, and he kind of leaves her no choice. Like, it's not like he threatens to blackmail her or anything, but she's going to be somewhat reluctant to cross him now, I feel like, just because he is in possession of this information that would be very damaging to her. But to your point, I remember this being kind of a later season 1 subplot. I didn't know that this was established right there in the pilot.
And it probably leads her on a little bit too, because like I think she's probably like, wow, he cared enough about me to follow me. Like he's actually the first person to give a shit enough to follow the bus.
True. Yeah.
Where I live, right? So all right, let's hit the rest of these categories before we do some ranking. So I wanted to do one called most important scene. Yeah. And I think you need a little foresight here. And I know when you do these types of shows, sometimes you play dumb a little bit, right? Of what's to come. But I do think for this, I want to see how many seeds are planted on like big things that happen later. So I kind of comboed this, but I went with Brenda and Kelly and Brandon and Steve meeting in class. Like to me, that was like the most important scene of this episode, when it came to being pertinent to the future.
Yeah. And I went with, kind of along similar lines, just Brandon and Kelly making eyes at each other, or just making those passing comments, which it's not even, it barely registers here, but knowing as we do what is to come with these characters in their history, that just feels like a big one. That's almost blatant, and you wonder why it was such a shock later to people when they did finally look up.
Yeah, I'd be curious how much they mentioned it. Because there has to be something there. Not to jump too far, but even when we did that episode about the 60s throwback, like in Brenda's mind, like Brandon is Will and, Kelly was Michelle and he had a thing for so
the
I
60s versions of them had
I
the hots for each other.
There, too. So, all right. Next category is most 90s look. And I think there's a lot in this episode.
Oh my God. Yes.
But I went with Brandon's Canadian tuxedo.
Okay. I've got it on the list.
Very Minnesotan early 90s to a T with the jean jacket. I guess it wasn't a full Canadian tuxedo because he didn't have the jean shirt, but he had the jeans with the jean jacket and the white shirt. So
that's on my list. Brandon's also got the Canadian Mist mullet, which that's not gonna stick around. More pilotitis. It's not. He doesn't look hideous with it or anything, but it's certainly not the Brandon you think of when you
more clean cut. Yeah.
I had a lot of contenders here. You had David's sort of Vanilla Ice cosplay, like the next day at school after the party, where he's hiding out from Steve. Steve himself in Spanish class with his Izod Lacoste shirt. That's very where it's at for preppy early 90s, jock. But I ultimately went with Kelly, who I think is going to maybe have this.
She'll win a lot of these. Yeah.
Yeah. This is going to be locked up by Kelly, I think, for me, moving forward, which I don't know how to describe it other than, again, it's after the party. It's just her and Brenda, and Donna's in the scene along with her other two extras. But she has on like this purple blouse with a hot pink blazer and knee-high blue leggings. And I think she may even have bicycle shorts on over the leggings. I can't tell if that's a separate piece or not, but it's the most gaudy, like eye-popping sort of clash of colors, but it's such a 1990. Like the layers I think of as very 80s, but the colors are super 90s.
Yeah, well, it's a good blend because we're 1990, so she's a little ahead of the time actually with it. Probably.
Yep.
All right.
Brenda had a few looks similar to that, but nothing as close to Kelly's.
All right, most 90s moment. Again, this actually, there weren't as many that jumped out at me as I thought there would be in this. Maybe without the music, a little bit didn't help, but I didn't see as many glaring 90s things. So I went with Marianne with the Walkman sitting at lunch.
That's a
big,
good one.
Kind of thin metal headphones with the big, like, I don't know what those things called, like Nerf material, the ones they used to go on your ear.
That's one. I went with another Marianne moment, which was Marianne writing her name on Brandon's arm using lipstick.
That's a good one.
When has anyone ever done that since?
I started panicking for Brandon, how he was going to keep this intact.
Oh my God. Yep.
He's smart enough to memorize it, hopefully, but I immediately started thinking, well, just take a picture with your phone, right? But you can't. So yeah, I was like, oh man, I was like getting nervous for him.
Runner up, probably that club scene. Also, just the whole, the lineup of people trying to get in. Yeah. The place is called the Blue Iguana, which is such a. We all had clubs with these names like that in the 90s.
Pretty good Mexican place in Salt Lake City, the Blue Iguana.
There you go. It's either a Mexican restaurant or a club. And the bad fake IDs, of course. Just that's a totally 90s thing.
All right. So I went one of our last categories here, best lesson learned.
Oh, God.
So this could be a lesson learned, by you, the viewer, by the characters. And I had two here. They're very similar, though. They're both ID related. So one is never enter a club until all of your friends get in with their fake IDs. Don't go plowing into the club. And then also, before you're going to try and bang a girl that looks kind of young, check her ID maybe, or at least have proof of age. So those are my two lessons learned when it comes to fake IDs.
On the flip side of that, I have, and this is a very victim blaming sort of lesson, but again, it's the 90s. but it seemed like the takeaway, what they leave us with at the end here is, don't date grown men when you're a child.
That too.
Like, I think that is sort of the lesson here, because I mean, not that either one of them faces any real consequences, but it's framed as more Brenda is the one who learns the lesson. Like, nothing happens to Jason, right? It's not like he gets arrested for, making out with a fucking 16-year-old, whatever. It's insane. There's a little bit of don't spread rumors, or don't substantiate rumors by your vague non-responses when asked about them.
Yeah, that's the one too. Like, he kind of knew. You could see it in his eye that he kind of knew what he did as he was doing it.
He kind of knew what he did, but he didn't want to walk it back either. He did sort of, I don't know, want to leave people with enough suspicion, maybe.
Right. Yeah, he was definitely trying to use it for a little bit of clout. But
Yeah.
I also think he immediately realized he was in over his head, because, I think they don't really implicitly say this, but I think part of it too is, like, shit probably didn't work this way in Minnesota, right? Where the rumor mill, the DJ, like, it's everywhere within an hour, basically. Like, everyone knows. So, all right, we did best hookup. That was Brandon and Marianne, and then best quotes. Not a lot to me jumped out of this one, honestly, tonight. But I went with I originally had this with most 90s. And then I switched it to best quote, and that is David saying, "The babes are outrageous." I believe he was saying that about the school.
Yeah.
Which was, I thought, like a perfect 90s teen show encapsulating moment. Something he would absolutely be thinking, and he delivers it well.
Yeah, that's a good one. I have a couple of contenders. Another David-related one. This is Steve in response to David after busting him in his car. God, what did I do to deserve meeting a dork like this? My favorite is actually an exchange. So not one person, but between Marianne and Brandon, shortly after they meet in her very labyrinthine house. She goes, "Oh, you smell so good. What is that you're wearing?" And he goes, "I don't know, Tide." It's just,
Oh yeah, that was good.
Boy from Minnesota,
Yeah.
doesn't know what to say, but is, it's working for him.
All right,
So I like that.
Let's wrap up with our final grade. I thought it was a pretty good pilot. I thought they established a lot. It wasn't too over the top. It wasn't off-putting. I could see why it kind of caught on. Pretty good for a primetime teen soap. The characters kind of feel fleshed out already too. Like we said, they organically brought the worlds together. Didn't feel forced. We've already, seen that Beverly Hills has lived before this, and these people are coming in. And, we mentioned earlier, but it was much less Walsh focused than we thought. I'd say maybe 65-35 Walsh, which I probably would have guessed more like 90-10 at least coming in. So it was definitely a surprise to see how non-Walsh centric it was.
Yeah, I would agree. And then there's things that sort of are here for this pilot and this pilot only, so we don't get too attached to them. We don't get too hung up on them either. We just know that, that's going to change. The show has not found its identity yet, but the characters are pretty well established. We are missing one notable character, but that is going to correct itself very quickly. And I think we've got a really good sense of who everyone is here, who all of our, major players are in this show going forward. And they all sort of have a decent hook. And it's so funny. Like you said, it's not as Walsh centric. And I still feel like you kind of have a show here, even without the Walshes, but they provide you with that lens into this world that I do think is important.
Right, we're joining them for the ride in.
Yeah, I mean,
all right, so
it's a very American, very aspirational sort of show. It's a teen drama, but especially with it being 1990, we're kind of a materialistic culture. Let's face it. You can't just do the Degrassi thing of casting ordinary looking people, normal people, and saying, "Oh, this is your show now." And it's like, that's boring. That's just my life. I want to see cool people doing the kinds of things that I want to be doing.
Yep.
And
all right,
so that's what this serves as, I think.
So for final grade out of 10, you can do halves. I went 5.5 out of 10. I thought this was above average pilot. I thought they got a lot done. I didn't want to go too high because I know we get some heights to climb. But I thought this. I didn't want to go like average either. I debated 5, but I feel like they deserved a little bump because I thought it was a better than average pilot.
Yeah, I would agree. It is better than average. I'll go ahead and give it a 6. Just because, I mean, I think it's tough to do a pilot. They're almost always destined to suck, even for good shows. It's just really hard. It's more like almost something you have to endure and just get through. But this didn't feel like that. This actually felt like a pretty good episode of the series, and
we didn't even mention it. It was a 2-hour too, so like
and
it really
2 hours.
That's why we had a lot to cover, but it really flew by. Honestly, like I got sucked in pretty easily, and it cruised along for a 2-hour episode.
And it had a lot of ground to cover. It's well paced. It's a good introduction, and there will be certainly better episodes to come, even in this first season, which all in all I think is a little rocky, but yeah, 6 out of 10 for me.
All right, so really quickly, courtesy of Tune Find, I'm going to read down the soundtrack, the songs that actually aired in the episodes, and once we get to a point where maybe we're able to actually watch the episodes with the music, we can talk best songs for each. But I'll just list. So the beginning scene, Brandon's alarm clock goes off. It's "I Want Your Love" by Transvision Vamp.
Yep.
Then we get the West Beverly introduction. That is "All Want Is Everything" by Jellyfish.
Great 90s band. Yep.
The Motion of Love, Gene Loves Jezebel is the song playing at the club. Attacked by Monsters by the Meat Puppets is Marianne's party when Brandon arrives.
They are playing live at this party, which you can see on Hulu.
Yes, because
cut out in the other versions, but for some reason on Hulu we actually get to see the band playing these. Which
it's a big get right there. I get the meat puppets.
The Meat Puppets, right?
Yeah.
Which I wrote down as Meat Puppers for some reason.
They also play Paradise when Steve's talking to Kelly, Jackson Brown's Boulevard when David drives Steve home, Clear to You by the Innocence Mission. That's when Brandon and Marianne are on the bike. And
that scene, I would say, is worth going out of your way to actually find.
Song.
Yeah, do that on, again, on the Instagram, that account I told you about, BH90210 Restored, all the way to the bottom. You got to scroll down a bit. But when you see Brandon and Marianne on that Kawasaki, whatever it is, that's a pretty cool, like that almost was a contender for like best scene for me, just because it was very just romantic and sort of, I don't know. It felt like a scene out of like The Lost Boys, if you've seen that movie, which you probably haven't because it's too scary.
True.
That's
all right. And then Wild in the Streets by Garland Jeffries is when Brandon and Brenda are in the car. So I don't know if this is every song, but it's at least the bulk.
I think it is. I really think it is. So yeah, that should cover that ground.
Okay. Here are the character debuts in this first episode. We have Brandon Walsh, Brenda Walsh, Jim Walsh, Cindy Walsh, Steve Sanders, Kelly Taylor, David Silver, Scott Scanlon, Andrea Zuckerman, Donna Martin, the fat chemistry teacher, Marianne Moore, and Jason the lawyer. So I didn't include like the principal. I guess I could have, I'll add on the Spanish teacher. But I tried to keep it to either people that are going to stick around or like people with names that had significant roles.
Right. Named characters. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Kathy and Michelle who are.
I didn't feel like they were worth playing.
Like, I don't think we'll see them again.
All right. I noted 2 relationships. We have Jim and Cindy Walsh, and then Brandon and Marianne. So I don't think we went. I mean, would you count Steve and Kelly? They're not really in a relationship yet.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, they were in a relationship, but it's very clearly over now. I mean, he tries to rekindle it over and over, but.
Yeah, I don't think we can put them. I need something to happen to count it. But I will add Brenda and Jason as well. That was basically a relationship on the show.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
All right. Here are places and things. And things can be an actual thing or like, I guess a thing. But here's what I noted for this. So basically important pieces. So I have the Walsh home, but Walsh home number 1, I called it.
Yeah.
Then West Beverly High, Steve's Ferrari, the Beverly Blaze office, and Andrea's house. You think I missed any like key things or places?
I mean, we're not going to see Marianne's house again. It's a cool setting, but it's one and done. And that's going to be the story of like a lot of guest stars. throughout this first season.
Yeah, a lot of one.
See them once and don't get too attached. Yeah, I mean, I think that is going to cover it. I mean, maybe the blue iguana is going to be popping up again. It's not a name that is familiar to me, but I don't know.
If it comes up again, maybe I'll go back and add it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Final thing we're going to do here tonight is the character ranking. So I count 10 main characters. It's pretty much, Brandon, Brenda, Steve and David, Kelly and Donna, Andrea, Scott, and then Jim and Cindy. And that'll grow as we go. So what we're going to do is I want to come up with a aggregate ranking between me and you that we agree upon.
Okay.
And then in that ranking, they'll get assigned points. So the top character will get 10 points and then down. Because I'm going to use that.
It's a very scientific way of
Yes.
evaluating our characters. I like it.
Because I want to then use it to do a cumulative as we go. So each episode will kind of have their rank, and then they'll get points for that episode, and they'll build our cumulative score of who the best character is. So let's go worst to best. How's that sound?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's easier to go from the bottom up.
Okay. So I had Donna Martin as the worst out of the 10.
Yeah, sort of by default. I mean, she's barely even a character in this.
Okay. I then had whiny Scott Scanlon as number 2.
See, I kind of go, and it's not his fault, but Jim Walsh is also barely a character in this episode.
Yeah, but I kind of like him in the morning because he's such a dad where he's like,
yeah,
there's a lot of gridlock on the 508. I better get out there. What the fuck he says.
That line might be worth it. I don't know. I think I put him lower than Scott only because Scott does have some actual plot significance as far as it's his hat.
Let me tell you who I have in here now. So I had Jim, then Andrea, then Scott as 4, 3, and 2. So would you put Jim below Andrea and Scott? And then would you move Scott? Where would Scott be versus Andrea?
Scott would be below Andrea.
Okay.
She's Andrea's positioned a little bit higher than I think she maybe deserves. And we talked about this a little bit off air, but I would have Andrea ahead of Jim and Cindy and Scott, honestly. Not that I want her to be, but.
So I had Cindy at 5 because I thought she was a little more active.
Yes, she was.
So the way I have her right now is Cindy, Andrea, Scott, Jim, Donna, but you would put Andrea above Cindy?
Yes, I would.
Andrea just annoyed me too. Her trying to poison Brandon on Marianne. That was a shit move.
Oh yeah, and she made it. But I mean, it is character development, right? Even if we don't necessarily like the character, sort of.
I'm ready to get pushed around on my own show. All right, so this is the bottom 5.
Gotta give you a fight. Come on.
All right, so for the top 5, I had Kelly as the worst of the 5. Not her fault. She just didn't do a ton.
Yeah, I think that works.
Okay. Then I had Brenda next.
Okay.
And then, so my top 3 going from 3 to 1 was David, Steve, and Brandon. I mean, I thought David and Steve completely stole the episode. I originally had Brenda second, but when the more I thought about it, Steve and David's scenes to me were the best. Anytime they were on, I really enjoyed it. I thought we got a lot of good character development between the two of them. We get to see the Corvette. We get to see the car driving, just everything they had to me. They were already my favorite part of the show to watch.
Yeah, I mean, they got our best moment, and even a runner-up best moment. Yes. I might flip Steve and David, but honestly, I'd be fine.
You leave Brenda. You're okay with Brenda below them?
I am fine with Brenda below them.
All right, so let's stick with that. Let's go Brandon, Steve, David, Brenda. I mean, Brandon, the show was really, we hear Walsh's, but it was really focused a lot on him. I thought he was really good with Marianne. You could see why he's going to be, fucking Brandon Walsh, right? Out of the gate.
Yeah, I mean, his plot, both of them get their own both Brandon and Brenda get their separate subplots, but his is more dialed into just the ecosystem of West Beverly, whereas Brenda's kind of off in her own world doing this weird thing.
All right, so the order right now with 10 points, Brandon Walsh, 9, Steve Sanders, 8, David Silver, 7, Brenda Walsh, 6 points, Kelly Taylor, 5, Andrea Zuckerman, 4, Cindy Walsh, 3, Scott Scanlon, 2 points for Jim Walsh, and 1 point for Donna Martin. Who's going to have some work to make up some ground here in the future episodes. So
I like it.
Hey, I had a blast. Again, this is something I've been wanting to do for a while. So I don't know exactly the schedule is going to be yet for this show. I'm going to try and figure it out. But we'll be back sooner than later. I'm going to have a new guest, Tim, but you will be back at some point. Very soon in the rotation, I'm sure.
I look forward to it. Anytime. I will do the show anytime. I'll move things around if need be.
Look at you working the schedule. It's gridlock.
Yeah.
All right. So in the next episode, we'll cover the Green Room. That is season 1, episode 2. There'll be a very big debut in that episode, of course, like we hinted at earlier. We'll be talking about that. Tim, really quick, just where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter. I am at Cyke68, CYKE 68.
All right. You can find out everything else Tim has going on in the world of podcasts via that. You can find me at JT the Pod Guy on Twitter, northsouthconnection.podbean.com. On my Twitter, there's a pinned document with all the great podcasts you can find here. We appreciate the love. If you get a minute, just go over to Apple Podcasts or any podcast subscription service that you take part in. You can rate and review the feed. We'd really appreciate it. And if you have any thoughts as well, find us on social media. You can send it to me on Twitter or on our Facebook page, North South Connection. I think it's just facebook.com/North South Connection. Leave your feedback. We'll read it on air in future episodes if there's anything I missed on this one. So thank you for listening. It's been a little densome. Talk to you soon. Everyone take care.